After learning of the details surrounding Will Smith's tragic death in Louisiana, Cardinals defensive back Tyrann Mathieu took to Twitter calling his alleged murderer a coward. Since then, he's received death threats, and here he is discussing it with Rich Eisen on the Rich Eisen Show.
I think it was one of those situations where he was really at the wrong place at the wrong time, and he bumped into the wrong person. I mean, you know, I know this guy personally, and Rich is not really for me to put his personal business on air. Mm-hmm. Because when I came out yesterday and called him a coward, I received death threats from guys in New Orleans, from his relatives. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you know, what do you guys want from me? I'm only here to speak the truth. Every time I go back home, Rich, I cannot stay for longer than 2 days. People know where you are, they know where you're at, and they will find you. And they will bump into you, and they will try to start any kind of altercation with you. And the first thing that they think about is to take your life. They don't want to ask any questions. They don't want to talk about anything. They just want to let loose with their gun.
Ryan Clark here with us, obviously a Louisiana native. Will Smith's tragic death, heartbreaking, a father, a husband, just 34 years old. But what were your takes on Matthew's comments there?
And by the way, real quick, give your background.
Well, yeah, I grew up, lived in the 9th Ward off of St. Bernard Ave for a long time, and my parents moved to the West Bank when I started going to school there, in middle school and high school.
Which is on the other
It's on the other side
of New Orleans.
Of the New Orleans, of the river, of the Mississippi River, about 10 minutes from the Superdome. But for me, I'm not surprised. You know, I think this thing has gotten a lot of traction and a lot of light has been shed on what's going on in New Orleans because it's Will Smith. Just last year, Keenan Lewis, that plays cornerback for the New Orleans Saints, lost his brother-in-law and his brother-in-law's pregnant wife in a shooting. And so when you know the city and when you've grown up in the city and when you see these things, I read some quotes from Drew Brees. He said that you get desensitized, and you do, not from a sense that you don't think it's a big deal that teenagers, that young women, that old ladies get hit by stray bullets and that there's shootings every day, and that I refuse to watch the news when I'm home because I just don't want to see it. And then you go talk to these kids and you go into these schools and you go into communities and you have camps when different guys, because so many guys from there play in the league, and you have these camps and you see these kids and you can see that their mindset is already set the same exact way. And so you're trying to break what has become almost tradition of a way to live. You know, Tyrann talked about guys bumping into you and trying to start altercations. I remember being younger and walking around a park, and these two guys are walking, and they bump into an older friend of mine, a guy I kind of looked up to, and nothing happened. He just kept walking. They came through and did it again. He starts talking to one of the guys, another guy hits him. It was a setup. That's what they wanted to do. That's what they came there to do. But now it's different because these young kids shoot. It's not about taking a loss anymore. You know, older people talk about it all the time. Even in me growing up, you know, you would talk about playing basketball or being out in the street with your friends. You get in a fight, you dap it off afterwards, and you're friends again tomorrow. They don't do that anymore. The lack of value for human life. And it's not just New Orleans. It's not just there, but that's where I'm from. That's what we're talking about. And it's been that way. Master P is a rapper. He's from New Orleans. And they would put out, when I was in college, they would basically put out a CD every Tuesday. And one of the main things he would always say in his songs was murder capital of the world. This is not new. This is not something that people from New Orleans or people from Louisiana don't know. It's the same reason I don't go to Mardi Gras. It's the same reason I've never been to the French Quarter Festival, which was this weekend. And I was down there. My best friend got married. I was his best man. And I was in the hotel that was right next to the French Quarter, and I refused to walk out there. Because you don't want the trouble. You don't want the altercations. It's almost to the point where if a guy steps on your shoes, you wipe off the bottom of his shoe and tell him that you're sorry for putting your foot under his. And so what Tyrann is talking about is true. Somebody like him, he will be a target. And if you're outspoken and if you know the people he knows and you've grown up in the places that he's grown up, you understand it. You understand that a threat is not just a threat, it's a promise. That they will find you, they will look for you. And it's sad. And so when you hear about Will Smith and you see the story, it's just like Molly said. You think about Raquel Smith and you think about his 3 children who are young children who now have no father, who now have no husband. It's to the point now that people there, though, they don't even see it. You know, like they take YOLO for real, but they miss that you only die once too. And you don't come back from that. You don't come back from taking a man's life. And the man's life that you took, he can never get that back. And so we bring attention to it now because it's a former NFL star. But this is real life. This is what people like Tyron come from. This is the life they know. And when you know that life, it's hard to get people to change it. And so hopefully this situation will give us the opportunity to start the narrative of it having to be changed. But for me, it has to start when the 16-year-old kids shoots the 17-year-old kids and we've never heard any of their names. And now that's where you have to start this movement in order to prevent senseless tragedies like what we saw this weekend.
Stephen A.
There is not a black person in the United States of America that I know that does not have a story involving gun violence. It's gotten to a point where it's an epidemic. We all know what's been going on in Chicago. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't get talked about enough. We know now, and we've always known to some degree, like Ryan just articulated, what's been going on in New Orleans. And it's happening in various cities throughout this nation. But when you look at what, and really dissect what Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger, had to say, think about what he's saying. And Skip, you'll remember that I've said this on many occasions. It's incredibly important to the young athlete, far more often than not, that they're able to go home. And what I mean by that is not always literally being able to go home, but it's being able to go into a community similar to what you and where you come from, and being respected and being seen as somebody that didn't transcend to another elevated level, but forgot the trenches that you were in and the people who are still there and what they have to go through on a day in, day out basis, fighting to be relevant and to feel as if they matter in this world that we live in. Tyrann Mathieu saying what he said to me is incredibly profound because it is so true. I have no doubt he's gotten death threats. I'm sure Ryan has no doubts either. And he got those death threats because you've got people in that community who's going to look at Cardell Hayes, who shot Will Smith, and they're going to say, who the hell are you to talk about him that way? Who the hell are you to characterize or character assassinate or denigrate him in any way? What we're talking about is the fact that no matter what happened, you didn't have to shoot the man. But that's not what people are going to look at. They're going to look at the fact that you called out one of us. And if they see Tyrann Mathieu, I have no doubt they're going to try to do something to him. So he's wise to articulate what transpired. He's wise to want to stay away. And he's wise for the reasons why that he pointed out. And it points, Molly, Skip, Ryan, because you might not have heard me the other day, Ryan, I pointed this out the other day. When you talk about what's happening, you also got to talk about the why. When you have gentrification, when you have people being displaced, when you have homelessness, when you have unemployment, when you have poverty, you also have individuals suffering under those circumstances who've essentially devalued life because they're looking at their life and how hardcore it is every day. And rather than strive to elevate themselves to another level, a lot of people give up hope because they believe this is the way that it's going to be, because this is the way, for the most part, it has been in our society. No matter what unemployment is in the rest of America, it's always more in the black community. No matter where we suffer in our society, One thing or two things are guaranteed in America. Whatever ails us as a society, black people are usually the first to suffer, and they usually suffer the most. And when you have that as your reality, if you don't have the intestinal fortitude to continue to climb because you're just worn down by life and the weight that is thrusted upon you, then you're going to be down in the trenches, believing that you'll never be able to get up from it. So unless you flat out die, then your mentality is very, very simple. I'm going to drag folks down here with me, see what it's like right down here. And that is what we're dealing with. That is what this situation speaks to in a lot of different ways. No matter what anybody says, that's what it ultimately comes down to. So you got to discuss not just what, but you got to discuss the why. And you have to go about the business of remedying the problem like Ryan just articulated. If you don't go about the business of doing that and you leave things as status quo, there's just going to be more of this. And eventually, it's going to extend far beyond the black community. And it's going to affect a lot of other communities as well in this country if folks don't raise up and take heed and start putting forth appropriate mission to alleviate this violence.
And that's why I want to continue this conversation. I so appreciate both of you shedding your light, your story, and insight on this. I want to keep this conversation going. It's a conversation we need to have. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a couple minutes here on First Take. Stay with us.